Today, it's our privilege to share with you the story of how God started Preston Trail Community Church. God gave me this vision, or what I would say, it wasn't anything dramatic. It was actually just a nudging, a whisper. On Saturday, the 11th of August, 2001, about noon. I tell you that because the setting is that I happened to be at a conference in Atlanta, so I was there with my staff, and that day at the closing session on Saturday, Bill was interviewing executives in a missions organization about how you know when it's time to leave an organization and to make way for new leadership.
I didn't feel called toward, I felt called from.
Explain that.
I had been there 10 years. If I had signed up for another 5 years, it would have taken me into my 60th year. Of course, nobody retires at the age of 60, so you go on to 65. Now I'm a 20-year man, and I wanted another run up the mountain.
At that moment, as Dan Seipel, president of World Vision, made that statement, I wrote down on my notes, God, you may be doing this. Then I wrote down, when you get home today, call Jim Johnson. The idea of co-pastoring was actually born out of good old-fashioned desperation. I was desperate to see God be a part of a church that was a prevailing church, and so I called Jim about that. After praying some more about location, we settled on Frisco, never having been here sight unseen, based on the reports of friends independently to us that this was going to be a rapidly expanding area. And so we resigned our churches in early December with no people, no land, no money, no building, some said a touch of craziness, to move to Frisco after the first of the year.
And so for the first 4 months that we were here, 5 to 7 hours a day, we prayed and we brainstormed, and we believe God guided us to come up with our mission statement. And so what drives this church, the filter through which everything we do comes, is this statement: we will give our lives to help people find and follow Jesus Christ. There's one other foundation that was laid, not on paper, but in our hearts. It was the foundation of having to learn to live by faith and to lead by faith. But there were some times when the money was getting low, and Paul and I would go and pray together, and we had a big payment due, and we'd just go, and the Lord would always come through. But on one particular occasion, we were kind of wondering, is God going to do it again? Is he going to do it again? And while we were praying, I think the Spirit prompted me to simply pray this prayer: Oh Lord, help us remember that your last act of faithfulness is not your last act of faithfulness. There is no limit to the faithfulness of God. And so he burned that deeply in our minds and hearts, that he planted and started a good work in us, and he was going to carry it through to the end. And that's a very important axiom for us today. We also had to do our homework to really understand this area that we are now planting a church in. And we said this: if we're going to really reach this people for Christ, this community for Christ, we've got to find a way to reach out to families.
And based on a cool ministry that Jim had known about firsthand in Atlanta at Andy Stanley's church, North Point, called Kid Stuff, that was a children's theater approach to the gospel, we prayed about launching the church with that approach, the children's approach. I knew of a young lady by the name of Amy Mixon, whom my wife and I had seen act in Birmingham. I call her. She begins to blubber like a baby over the phone. God's been leading me to church. I didn't know where. Yes.
Well, I did come from Birmingham. Paul and Jim bought into my version of crazy, and I am so thankful that they did. And when they said we want to start it with the children's ministry, kind of a Sunday school on steroids, I was like, I am down. Let's do this.
So on September 8th, AMC Theater 17, we launched Dude Ranch, a weekly children's theatrical production that taught biblical principles to kids, and although they didn't know it, to their parents.
6 o'clock, September 8th, 2002. I had my car loaded down. Everybody else had their car loaded down. We showed up in the Stonebriar Mall parking lot. It was dark. We're all pretty asleep. We get in the lobby. We are trekking through the front part of the mall. I need you to picture it with me. Go with me here. Bales of hay, cacti, a windmill, 3 barns, boots, a stage, you name it. So we trek it up. You know the escalator that goes up to the movies? It was off. It was off. So onward, Christian soldiers, here we go. We rocked it all the way up there. We got set up. Now, if we were asleep, the smell of burnt hot dogs and popcorn really rocked us awake at that point. And then when we set up back in the hallways, you know, you've wondered when you're in the movies, what's back there, that exit door? Well, that was our backstage. And the mice were back there, and they were cheering us on. They were like, come on, Preston Trail, let's do this. And so we stood behind the barns, and there was a countdown on the screen. We were back there hoping that people would get there. And all of a sudden, here they come. Tiny voices, we heard. Little laughter. And that's what I was waiting to hear. And there it was. And they weren't kids that were kids of the volunteers. They were kids that parents had gone up the escalator that was on, by the way, at that point. Went up the escalator, got in the seats. And then the countdown hit 0. And the lights went on. And I ran out and said, howdy. And there was 20 people. 20 people, kids and parents together. So I need you to see how many people are here and realize it started with those 20 and then they came back. It was fabulous. And it was all because we exist to give our lives to help people find and follow Jesus Christ.